The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. 12 species sat in their designated seats, arranged in a perfect circle beneath a dome of crystal that showed the endless stars beyond. This was the heart of galactic civilization, where the most powerful beings in known space gathered to decide the fate of worlds. Today, they had gathered to do nothing. Ambassador Nicole Grant stood at the edge of the human delegation's platform, her hands gripping the railing so hard her knuckles turned white. She was 43 years old, a career diplomat who had spent 15 years learning the art of patience and careful words. Right now, she wanted to scream. On the massive display screen at the center of the chamber, images played on a loop. Cities burning, bodies in the streets, ships descending from the sky like metal locusts, raining fire on everything below. The world was called Velar Prime, and it was dying. The Velari people have been members of this council for over 2,000 years, the Velari ambassador was saying. His name was Elder Tovin, and his voice shook as he spoke. He was a tall, thin creature with soft gray skin and large dark eyes that were made for seeing in dim forest light, not for watching his world burn. We have always paid our contributions. We have always followed council law. We have never asked for help before. We are asking now. The Velari were a gentle species. They had evolved as herbivores on a world of vast forests and mild seasons. They had no military. They had never needed one. For 2,000 years, the protection of the Galactic Council had been enough. Until the Krath Dominion decided it wanted their world. The Krath were everything the Velari were not. They were predators, conquerors, a species that had built their empire on the bones of a dozen worlds. They were not members of the Council. They did not care about Council law. And 3 days ago, they had invaded Velar Prime with a fleet of over 200 warships. High Chancellor Morath of the Tyranny Collective rose from his seat. He was an impressive figure, nearly 3 meters tall, with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms that he folded across his chest in a gesture of deep regret. The Tyranny Collective shares the sorrow of the Velari people, he said. This unprovoked aggression is a tragedy. However, the Collective cannot commit military forces to a conflict so far from our borders. The risk to our own people is too great. Nicole felt her stomach turn. She had heard this speech before. She would hear it again. Ambassador Thessia of the Eldari Consortium spoke next. Her species was ancient, one of the founders of the Council, and her voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of civilization. The Eldari mourn for Velar Prime. We will provide humanitarian aid to any refugees who reach our space. But we cannot intervene militarily. The Krath are too powerful. A war would cost millions of Eldari lives. One by one, the species spoke. The Marathi Union expressed deep concern, but cited economic difficulties. The Vortan Republic offered thoughts and prayers, but noted that their fleet was committed elsewhere. The Solari Dominion simply stated that the matter did not affect their interests. Elder Tovin listened to each refusal with growing desperation in his eyes. Please, he said when the last species had spoken. There are 3 billion people on Velar Prime. Families, children. The Krath do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They will kill everyone. Everyone. The chamber was silent. Nicole could not take it anymore. She stepped forward to the speaking platform, and the eyes of a dozen species turned to look at her. She could feel their dismissal. Humans were newcomers, children on the galactic stage. They had only joined the Council 40 years ago. What could they possibly have to say? How many ships would it take? Nicole asked. Her voice was steady, but inside, she was shaking with anger. High Chancellor Morath blinked his large yellow eyes. I'm sorry? How many ships would it take to stop the Krath, to break their invasion fleet, and save Velar Prime? The Chancellor made a dismissive gesture with 2 of his arms. A significant force, perhaps 100 capital ships, supported by fighters and ground troops. But this is irrelevant. No single species has such a force available, and a combined fleet would take months to organize. By then, Velar Prime will be gone, Nicole finished for him. By then, 3 billion people will be dead, and you'll all go back to your worlds and tell yourselves there was nothing you could do. Ambassador Grant, Fessia's ancient voice was cold. You forget your place. Humanity is young. You do not understand how the galaxy works. Sometimes, terrible things happen, and the wise choice is to accept them, rather than throw away lives in hopeless battles. Nicole looked at the Eldari ambassador for a long moment. Then she looked at Elder Tovin, who stood alone at his platform, tears streaming down his gray face. No, Nicole said quietly. I don't think I do understand how the galaxy works. Because where I come from, we don't watch innocent people die and call it wisdom. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her she could hear the murmur of confused voices. Let them talk. Let them wonder what the strange, primitive humans were thinking. In the corridor outside, she pulled out her communicator and connected to Earth Command. The face that appeared on the screen was Admiral Patricia Cole, a stern woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Admiral, Nicole said. They refused. All of them. Patricia Cole nodded slowly. I expected as much. The question is, what do we do about it? What can we do? We don't have 100 ships to send. We don't have the forces for a full military intervention. We're just humans, the Admiral finished. Yes, we are. She was quiet for a moment, looking at something off-screen. The USS Vanguard is 3 days from Velar Prime, at maximum speed. It's a single destroyer. 40 crew members. Captain Danny Carter commanding. One ship against 200? That's suicide. Yes, Admiral Cole agreed. It probably is. She looked back at Nicole, and there was something in their eyes that the ambassador recognized. It was the same thing she had felt in the council chamber. Fury. Cold, quiet, burning fury. I'm sending the order anyway, and then I'm putting out a general call to every human ship in the sector. For what? Admiral Cole smiled, but there was no humor in it. To ask if anyone else wants to come along. The council may have decided this isn't their fight, but I think there are some humans who might disagree. Nicole Grant stood in the corridor of the Galactic Council, surrounded by the ancient architecture of a civilization that had decided 3 billion lives weren't worth the risk. And for the first time since she had become a diplomat, she felt proud of what humans were. They're going to think we're insane, she said. Probably, Admiral Cole replied, but that's never stopped us before. The communication ended. Nicole looked back at the doors of the council chamber, where the great powers of the galaxy were already moving on to other business, already forgetting about the world that was burning. They didn't understand humans yet, but they were about to learn. Captain Danny Carter was drinking coffee in his quarters when the message came through. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray hair at his temples, the kind of officer who had seen enough combat to know that war was never glorious. He had commanded the USS Vanguard for 6 years, patrolling the quiet edges of human space, and he had hoped to finish his career without seeing another battle. The universe had other plans. He read the orders twice, then a third time. Then he set down his coffee cup and walked to the bridge. The Vanguard was a destroyer, one of the older models in the fleet. She had 40 crew members, 12 gun batteries, and enough armor to survive a few direct hits from enemy weapons. Against a normal threat, she was a capable ship. Against 200 Krath warships, she was a metal coffin. All hands to the bridge, Danny said into the intercom. This is not a drill. His first officer, Commander Chris Palmer, was the first to arrive, followed by Lieutenant Lisa Morgan, his tactical officer, and the others. They stood in a half-circle around the central display, their faces curious but calm. They trusted their captain. They had no idea what he was about to ask of them. Danny activated the display. Images appeared, the same ones that had played in the Galactic Council. Burning cities, fleeing refugees, Krath warships filling the sky like a swarm of metal insects. This is Velar Prime, Danny said. 3 days ago, the Krath Dominion invaded. The planet has a population of 3 billion. They have no military. The Krath are killing them. He paused, letting them look at the images. He saw the reactions on their faces. Horror, anger. The same things he had felt when he first received the orders. The Galactic Council has decided not to intervene. They say the risk is too great. They say it's not their problem. Danny's voice was flat, without emotion. Earth Command has decided otherwise. We have been ordered to proceed to Velar Prime at maximum speed and engage the Krath invasion fleet. Silence. Then Chris Palmer spoke, his voice careful. Sir, the reports say there are over 200 Krath ships. We're one destroyer. I know. We can't win that fight. We can barely survive it. I know that too. Danny looked at each of his crew members in turn. I'm not going to lie to you. This is probably a suicide mission. Command knows it, I know it. The odds of us coming back from this are very small. But there are 3 billion people on that planet who are going to die if someone doesn't do something. And right now, we're the only ones close enough to do anything at all. Lisa Morgan stepped forward. She was young, barely 30, with short dark hair and sharp eyes that never missed a detail. She was the best tactical officer Danny had ever worked with, and right now, she was smiling. Sir, with respect, what are we waiting for? A murmur went through the crew. Danny saw heads nodding, jaws setting with determination. These were not soldiers who had signed up for easy duty. They were humans. And humans did not watch innocent people die without a fight. Set course for Velar Prime, Danny ordered. Maximum speed. The Vanguard turned and began to accelerate toward the distant star where a world was burning. Behind them, the message went out across human space. Not an order, not a command, just information and a question. The cargo hauler Dusty Road was 2 days from Velar Prime when Captain Greg Shaw received the transmission. He was 62 years old, a retired Marine who had spent the last 10 years moving freight between colony worlds. His ship was old and slow, built for carrying supplies, not fighting battles. He had 12 crew members, none of them military, and exactly 0 weapons. Greg read the message. Then he called his crew together and told them what was happening. The Navy's sending 1 ship, he said, 1 destroyer against an invasion fleet. They're asking if anyone else wants to help. His engineer, a young woman named Betty Torres, looked at him with wide eyes. Help how? We're a cargo ship. We don't even have guns. We have a plasma cutter for salvage work. We have hull plating we could weld over the bridge for extra armor. We have a hold full of mining explosives that we were supposed to deliver to the asteroid belts. Greg smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. We're not a warship, but we're not nothing either. This is crazy, Betty said. We'll get killed. Probably, Greg agreed. But there are 3 billion people on that planet. Families, kids, and nobody else is going to help them. He looked at his crew. These ordinary people who had signed up to haul cargo, not to fight wars. I'm not ordering anyone to come. This is volunteer only. If you want to stay behind, I'll drop you at the nearest station. No hard feelings. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Betty Torres sighed and shook her head. I'll start welding the armor plates, she said. Someone else figure out how to turn those mining charges into missiles. Across human space, the same scene played out again and again. The mining vessel Iron Betty, crewed by roughnecks who had spent their lives cutting rocks in the asteroid belts, changed course toward Velar Prime. Their captain, a massive man named Joe Hendricks, had lost his brother to pirates 10 years ago. He knew what it felt like to have no one come to help. The passenger liner Starlight Dreamer was carrying 300 tourists on a luxury cruise when Captain Maria Santos received the message. She gathered her passengers in the main hall and explained the situation. She expected them to demand that she stay far away from the danger. Instead, a retired doctor named Phil Warren stood up and said, I spent 40 years as a surgeon. If there are going to be wounded, you're going to need medical help. I volunteer. Within an hour, half the passengers had volunteered for something. The entertainment staff became emergency medical assistants. The kitchen crew began preparing supplies for refugees. The ship's small security team started training anyone who wanted to learn how to fight. Private yachts changed course. Freight transports loaded with supplies turned toward the battle. Research vessels, exploration ships, even a group of college students on a semester abroad program in a rented shuttle. They came from everywhere. Humans who had heard that innocent people were dying and decided that someone had to do something. The Galactic Council received reports of the human movements and did not understand what they were seeing. This was not a military mobilization. There was no grand fleet, no organized battle plan. It was just ordinary people in ordinary ships flying towards certain death because they were angry. High Chancellor Morath watched the reports with growing confusion. "What are they doing?" he asked his advisors. "This makes no strategic sense. They cannot win this battle. Why would they throw their lives away?" None of his advisors had an answer. They had studied humans for 40 years and still did not understand them. Humans were emotional. Humans got angry about things that did not affect them, and made decisions that served no logical purpose. It was, the Chancellor decided, a very primitive way to behave. He had no idea that this primitive behavior was about to change the galaxy forever. Warlord Draxus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crushing Tide, and watched his empire grow. Through the massive viewing windows, he could see Velar Prime, hanging in space like a green and blue jewel, its surface dotted with the orange glow of burning cities. His ships filled the space around it, 200 vessels of war that had never known defeat. The invasion was going perfectly. The Velari had no military, they had no weapons, they had nothing but prayers and hope. And Draxus had learned long ago that prayers and hope meant nothing against plasma cannons and orbital bombardment. In another week, the planet would be pacified. In another month, the survivors would be working in Krath labor camps. In another year, no one would remember that the Velari had ever been free. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong took what they wanted, the weak died or served. The Galactic Council talked and debated and did nothing, because talking and debating was all they were good for. Draxus had conquered 6 worlds, while the Council issued statements of concern and passed resolutions condemning his actions. Their words were meaningless. Only power mattered. His communications officer approached with a tablet. "Warlord, we have detected incoming vessels, human ships, approaching from the outer system." Draxus took the tablet and examined the data. 32 ships, most of them small. Only 1 military vessel, a destroyer of outdated design. The rest were civilian craft, cargo haulers and passenger liners, and mining vessels, with improvised weapons welded to their hulls. He laughed. It was a harsh sound, like metal scraping against metal. "Humans," he said, shaking his head. "The youngest species in the Council. The weakest. And they send this against us? Should we intercept them, Warlord?" Draxus considered for a moment. The human ships were no threat. He could destroy them all in minutes. But there was something amusing about this, something that appealed to his sense of drama. Let them come. Let them see the full power of the Kraft Dominion before they died. No, he decided. Let them approach. When they are close enough to see what they face, they will run. And if they don't run, we will show the galaxy what happens to species that interfere with Kraft business. He turned back to the window, dismissing the humans from his thoughts. They were irrelevant, insects buzzing around a giant. He had no idea how wrong he was. On the surface of Velar Prime, Elder Tovin huddled in a basement shelter with 300 of his people. Above them, the city of Theron Hollow burned. The beautiful towers that had stood for 1,000 years were rubble now. The gardens where children had played were craters filled with ash. The sky was black with smoke, and through the smoke came the constant thunder of Krath weapons. Tovin was old. He had led his people for 60 years, through times of peace and prosperity, He had never imagined that he would lead them through extinction. A young technician named Sari came running through the crowded shelter, pushing past the huddled families and crying children. Her eyes were wide with something that might have been hope or might have been madness. "Elder," she gasped, "we're receiving a transmission. Someone is coming." Tovin's heart stopped. "The council, have they changed their minds?" "No, Elder, not the council." Sari held out a small communication device. "Humans. The humans are coming." Tovin took the device with trembling hands. The voice that came through was calm and clear, speaking in accented galactic standard. "Valar Prime, this is Captain Danny Carter of the USS Vanguard. I know you can hear me. I know you've been told that no one is coming. That was true when they said it. It's not true anymore. The Galactic Council may have given up on you, but we haven't. Hold on. We're coming. We're going to get you out of this." The transmission ended. Tovin stood in silence, staring at the device in his hands. Around him, his people had stopped crying. They were all looking at him, waiting for him to explain. "Humans," someone asked. "What can humans do? They're so young, so small." "I don't know," Tovin admitted, "but they're coming." He looked up, toward the ceiling, toward the sky, toward the ships that were killing his world. Someone is coming. Aboard the Vanguard, Captain Danny Carter sat in his command chair and watched the tactical display. The craft fleet filled the screen, 200 red dots arranged in a defensive formation around Valar Prime. His own ship was a single green dot, with a scattered collection of other green dots approaching from different directions. 32 ships, 1,200 humans, against 200 warships and 50,000 Krath warriors. Chris Palmer stood beside him, studying the same display. "They're not moving to intercept us," he observed. "They're letting us approach." "They think we're not a threat," Danny said. "They think we'll see their fleet and run. Will we?" Danny looked at his first officer. They had served together for 4 years. They had been through hard times and easy times. Chris knew him better than almost anyone. "What do you think?" Danny asked. Chris smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was steel behind it. "I think we came here to fight. I think those people down there are counting on us. I think if we run now, we'll have to live with that for the rest of our lives." He paused. "However long that turns out to be." In the medical bay, Dr. Samantha Price was preparing for casualties. She had converted every available space into a treatment area. She had trained every crew member in basic first aid. She had done everything she could to prepare for the wounded that would come. Sergeant Kevin Brooks found her there, organizing surgical supplies with calm efficiency. He was a big man, scarred from 3 different wars, and he led the small Marine detachment on the Vanguard. His squad was ready for ground combat, but they both knew that ground combat would only happen if the ship survived long enough to reach the planet. "Doc," Kevin said, "you should know that my boys are ready. Whatever happens up here, if we get a chance to hit the ground, we'll make it count." Sam looked at him. "You know the odds, Kevin. We're probably not going to survive this." "I know." Kevin's face was hard, but his eyes were soft. "I've been in bad situations before, lost friends, lost battles, but I've never run from a fight that mattered, and this one matters. 3 billion people, Doc. Families. Kids." He shook his head. "I'd rather die trying to save them than live knowing I didn't try." Sam nodded slowly. She understood. She felt the same way. They all did. "Then let's make sure as many of us survive as possible," she said. "I'll need your help carrying wounded if it comes to that." "You'll have it." Kevin turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Doc, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. All of you. It's good to know we're not alone." Sam smiled despite everything. "We're human, Kevin. We're never alone." The hours passed. The distance closed. And on the bridge of the Vanguard, Lisa Morgan ran the numbers one more time, looking for any advantage, any strategy that might give them a chance. The odds were impossible. The math said they should die. But Lisa had learned something in her years of service. Math didn't account for everything. It didn't account for anger. It didn't account for determination. It didn't account for what humans could do when they stopped calculating and started fighting. "Captain," she said, "I have a plan. It's crazy, but it might work." Danny Carter looked at her. "Tell me." And as the ragged human fleet closed in on the greatest military force in the sector, a young tactical officer began to explain how a handful of angry humans might just save a world. The Battle of Valar Prime began with a message. Warlord Draxus opened communications as the human fleet entered weapons range. His face filled the screen on every human ship, a mask of sharp bones and black scales and teeth designed for tearing flesh. Behind him, his bridge crew worked at their stations, calm and confident in their superiority. "Human vessels," Draxus said, his voice heavy with amusement. "You have entered Krath space. This world belongs to the Dominion now. Turn back, and we will let you live. Continue, and you will die. This is not your fight. These are not your people. Why sacrifice yourselves for prey animals you have never met?" On the bridge of the Vanguard, Danny Carter stood and faced the screen. His crew stood behind him, silent and ready. Somewhere out there, on 31 other ships, 1,200 other humans were watching. "That makes it our fight." He cut the transmission. "Lisa," he said, "execute your plan." Lieutenant Morgan smiled and gave the order. The Krath expected the humans to attack carefully. They expected the small fleet to probe for weaknesses, to look for escape routes, to fight like every other species fought, with an eye on survival, with tactics designed to minimize losses. Instead, the humans attacked like maniacs. The Vanguard led the charge, diving straight into the heart of the Krath formation at maximum speed. The destroyer's engines burned so hot that warning lights filled the bridge, but Lisa had calculated the tolerances perfectly. They screamed through the gap between two Krath battleships, firing every weapon they had, and the Krath ships were so surprised that they almost fired on each other, trying to track the human ship. Behind the Vanguard, the civilian ships spread out in a pattern that made no tactical sense. The cargo hauler Dusty Road headed for a Krath carrier, the largest ship in the fleet. The mining vessel Iron Betty dove toward a cluster of smaller warships. The passenger liner Starlight Dreamer hung back, its running lights converted into emergency beacons, broadcasting on all frequencies that it was a medical ship. Warlord Draxus watched his tactical display with growing confusion. "What are they doing?" he demanded. "This is no strategy. This is chaos." His tactical officer had no answer. The humans were not fighting like a military force. They were fighting like wild animals, all fury and no logic. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. The Dusty Road reached the Krath carrier and did something no sane military commander would ever do. Captain Greg Shaw aimed his cargo hauler directly at the carrier's hangar bay and accelerated. The carrier's guns tried to stop him, but the Dusty Road was too fast, too close, too committed to stop. The cargo hauler crashed through the hangar shields and slammed into the deck, crushing fighters and killing crew members. The impact should have killed everyone aboard, but Greg had welded extra armor plating around the bridge. The ship was destroyed, but the crew survived, and they came out fighting. Greg Shaw was 62 years old. He had not held a weapon in 10 years, but his hands remembered the training from his Marine days, and his heart remembered why he had become a soldier in the first place. He led his 12 crew members out of the wreckage and into the hangar, armed with pistols and cutting tools and pure human rage. The Krath did not know how to respond. Boarding actions were supposed to be organized. They were supposed to follow protocols. They were not supposed to involve retired cargo captains and civilian engineers screaming battle cries and attacking with plasma cutters. Across the battlefield, the Iron Betty proved that mining vessels could be deadly. Captain Joe Hendricks had spent 20 years cutting asteroids apart with industrial lasers, and he knew exactly how to aim those lasers at ship hulls. His crew worked the mining equipment with expert precision, and one by one, the smaller Krath warships began to break apart. On the vanguard, Lisa Morgan orchestrated the impossible. She used the debris from destroyed ships as cover. She directed the civilian vessels into positions where the Krath guns could not fire without hitting each other. She turned every piece of wreckage, every floating body, every bit of space junk into a tactical advantage. "They're adapting," she reported. "The Krath are starting to coordinate better. We need to hit their command ship." Danny looked at the tactical display. The crushing tide sat at the center of the Krath formation, the largest ship in the fleet, bristling with weapons. Getting close to it would be suicide. "Kevin," Danny said into the intercom, "get your Marines ready. We're going boarding." In the Marine Bay, Sergeant Kevin Brooks smiled. It was not a nice smile. The vanguard turned toward the crushing tide and accelerated. Krath ships tried to intercept, but the civilian vessels moved to block them, sacrificing themselves to clear a path. The yacht Silver Wind took 3 direct hits and exploded, but not before its pilot rammed a Krath destroyer and crippled its engines. The research vessel Starseeker used its scientific equipment to blind enemy sensors, giving the vanguard precious seconds of confusion. The Krath finally realized what the humans were doing, but by then, it was too late. The vanguard reached the crushing tide at full speed and crashed into its engine section. The impact was devastating. Both ships were crippled. The vanguard's hull cracked open, and atmosphere vented into space. Half the crew were killed instantly. But Kevin Brooks and his Marines were already moving. They crossed the gap between the ships in emergency suits, using the debris as cover. They cut through the crushing tide's hull with breaching charges, and entered the Krath flagship like demons from a nightmare. The Krath warriors were bigger than humans. They were stronger than humans. They had been bred for combat over 1,000 generations. None of that mattered. Kevin's Marines fought with a fury that the Krath had never seen. They moved through the corridors of the enemy flagship, killing everything in their path, pushing toward the bridge with single-minded determination. They took casualties. They took wounds. They did not stop. On the surface of Velar Prime, the Krath ground forces received orders to push harder, to finish the conquest quickly. Instead, they found themselves facing a new problem. Human dropships were landing near the refugee camps, bringing Marines and volunteers with weapons they had never been trained to use, but were determined to fire anyway. The college students who had been on a semester abroad program had never held guns before 3 days ago. Now they crouched behind rubble and fired at Krath soldiers, protecting Valari children they had never met. The entertainment staff from the Starlight Dreamer carried wounded refugees to safety, ignoring the danger, refusing to leave anyone behind. Elder Tovin watched the humans fight and did not understand. They were dying. Their ships were being destroyed. They had no chance of winning, and yet they kept fighting. A young human soldier, barely more than a boy, fell wounded near the shelter where Tovin was hiding. A Krath warrior moved in for the kill. Without thinking, Tovin ran out of the shelter and threw himself between the wounded human and the enemy. He had no weapon, he had no training, he had nothing but his own body and a desperate need to protect someone who had come to protect him. The Krath warrior hesitated, confused by this prey animal that refused to act like prey. And in that moment of hesitation, another human shot the warrior down. The wounded soldier looked up at Tovin with eyes full of pain and gratitude. "Thanks," he gasped. "You didn't have to do that." "You came to save us," Tovin said. "How could I do less?" Above them, the battle continued. The human fleet was dying, but so was the Krath fleet. And, on the bridge of the crushing tide, Warlord Draxus was about to learn what happened when humans got truly angry. Warlord Draxus heard them coming before he saw them. The screams of his warriors, the sound of gunfire moving closer, the strange, terrible battle cries of the humans as they fought their way through his ship. He stood on the bridge of the crushing tide, surrounded by his guards, and prepared to meet his enemy. He had never lost a battle. He had never retreated. He would not start now, The bridge doors exploded inward. Kevin Brooks came through first, his armor scarred and burned, his face covered in blood that was mostly not his own. Behind him came the surviving Marines, fewer than half of those who had started the assault. They looked like ghosts, like death itself walking in human form. The Krath guards attacked. The fight was brutal and fast. Kevin lost 2 more Marines in the first 10 seconds. But humans did not stop when they were hurt. Humans did not stop when they were outnumbered. Humans did not stop at all. When the last guard fell, Kevin Brooks stood face to face with Warlord Draxus. The Krath leader was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with claws that could cut through armor, and a mouth full of teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. "You cannot win," Draxus said. "Even if you kill me, my fleet will destroy your ships. Your species will learn the cost of challenging the Dominion." Kevin smiled. It was the smile of a man who had made peace with death, and found it did not scare him. "Maybe," he said, "but you won't be around to see it." Outside, the battle had reached a turning point. The human fleet was broken. 11 ships were destroyed. Half the others were crippled and drifting. The vanguard would never fly again. But the Krath had paid a terrible price. Over 40 of their warships were gone, destroyed by enemies they had dismissed as irrelevant. The carrier that the dusty road had crashed into was dead, its crew killed in corridor by corridor fighting. The smaller vessels that the Iron Betty had targeted were scattered wreckage. And the crushing tide, the flagship of the invasion fleet, had gone silent. The surviving Krath commanders looked at each other with something they had never felt before: fear. They had expected the humans to retreat when the cost became too high. They had expected them to run when the battle turned against them. Instead, the humans had kept attacking, kept fighting, kept dying without ever giving up. This was not how civilized species behaved. This was not how war was supposed to work. The Krath fleet began to withdraw. First one ship, then another, then a dozen at once. They pulled back from Velar Prime, abandoning their ground forces, leaving behind their dead and their pride. They had come to conquer a world. They were running from 32 ships crewed by people who refused to stop fighting. On the surface of Velar Prime, the Krath ground forces received the withdrawal order and broke. Some tried to reach their evacuation ships. Others simply surrendered, dropping their weapons and waiting for the humans to take them prisoner. Kevin Brooks stood on the bridge of the crushing tide, holding a pistol to the head of a warlord who had conquered 6 worlds. The battle was over. They had won. "Tell your people to surrender," Kevin said. "Tell them to stop killing civilians and give up their weapons. Do that, and you might live." Draxus looked at the human standing before him, this small, soft, short-lived creature who had fought through an army to reach him. He had ruled an empire. He had commanded millions of soldiers. He had never felt afraid of anything. He was afraid now. The Krath surrendered. The news reached the Galactic Council 3 days later. Ambassador Nicole Grant requested the floor, and was given it immediately. Every representative was present. Every eye was watching. "The Battle of Velar Prime is over," Nicole said. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something that made even the oldest species pay attention. "The Krath invasion has been defeated. 3 billion Valari lives have been saved." High Chancellor Morath shifted in his seat. "We heard the reports. The human losses were severe. 11 ships destroyed. Over 400 dead." "Yes," Nicole agreed. "We lost many good people. And we would do it again." The chamber was silent. "You asked us why we came," Nicole continued. "You called us young. You called us reckless. You called us foolish. Maybe you're right. Maybe humans haven't learned to calculate acceptable losses the way you have. Maybe we haven't evolved past our primitive emotions. Maybe we're just too stupid to know when a fight isn't worth fighting." She paused, looking at each representative in turn. The Tyranni with their careful calculations. the Eldari with their ancient wisdom, the Marathi with their economic concerns, species that had watched a world burn and done nothing. Or maybe, Nicole said, fury isn't a weakness. Maybe caring too much isn't a flaw. Maybe the galaxy needs species who will stand up when no one else will. Species who will fight for strangers. Species who will die for people they've never met, simply because it's the right thing to do. She let that sink in. The Valari called us saviors. The Krath called us monsters. The truth is simpler than either of those words. We're just humans. And humans get angry when innocent people suffer. We get furious when children are killed, and refugees are slaughtered, and entire worlds are wiped out, while the powerful species of the galaxy sit in their comfortable chambers and do nothing. Nicole stepped back from the speaking platform. You wanted to know what kind of species we are. Now you know. We are the furious ones. We are the ones who will not stand by and watch. And if that makes us primitive, if that makes us young and foolish and reckless, then so be it. We would rather be primitive and fight than be wise and do nothing. She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving silence behind her. On Velar Prime, the rebuilding began. Human engineers helped clear the rubble. Human doctors treated the wounded. Human volunteers worked beside Valari survivors to plant new gardens in the places where the old ones had burned. Elder Tovin oversaw the construction of a monument to the fallen. It stood in the center of Farron Hollow, where the fighting had been worst. A simple pillar of white stone with names carved into its surface. Human names and Valari names together. Because in the end, they had all fought for the same thing. The inscription at the base of the monument was written in every language the galaxy knew. They came when no one else would. They fought when no one else dared. They were only human, and that was enough. In the years that followed, the story spread. Other species began to watch the humans with new eyes. Some watched with admiration, some watched with fear. All of them watched with a new understanding of what this young, reckless, primitive species was capable of. When the Krath tried to rebuild their fleet, they found that humans had set up patrol routes along their borders. When other aggressive species looked for easy targets, they found humans already there. The galaxy had not become safe, but it had become safer, because everyone knew that there was a species that would fight for those who could not fight for themselves. Not for profit, not for power, not for territory. Just because they got angry when innocent people suffered. Captain Danny Carter recovered from his wounds. He was given a new ship, a better ship, and offered a promotion to admiral. He turned it down. He said he preferred to be where the action was. Lisa Morgan became the youngest tactical officer to be promoted to commander. She spent her career teaching other officers that sometimes the best strategy was to stop thinking and start fighting. Kevin Brooks retired from the Marines. He moved to Velar Prime and helped train a new generation of Valari to defend themselves. He said it was the most peaceful thing he had ever done. Dr. Samantha Price wrote a book about the battle. It became required reading at military academies across human space. She dedicated it to the 417 humans who had died at Velar Prime, and to the billions they had saved. And on every anniversary of the battle, humans across the galaxy paused to remember the day when 32 ships and 1,200 ordinary people had done what the greatest powers in the galaxy would not do. The phrase became famous when other species asked why humans behaved as they did, why they fought impossible odds and died for strangers and refused to accept injustice. The answer was always the same: because they're human, and humans get furious. It was not a sophisticated answer. It was not a wise answer. But it was the truth. And sometimes, the truth was enough.